to NATO, the director of the Defense Health Agency, the head of the Coast Guard, and all of the service judge advocates general. Continues to push out tens of thousands of civilians who should instead be repairing our ships, testing equipment, providing health care. It's rooting out fully qualified, combat-proven service members solely because they are transgender to satisfy a petty animus. And it's censoring service academy libraries so that no future leader of our military can read Maya Angelou or Janet Jacobs' book on the Holocaust. Even Jackie Robinson's World War II service photo is not safe from culture warriors. In January of this year, any patriotic American who met the qualifications could serve our nation, and the Marines at 29 Palms were training for the Indo-Pacific, not the streets of Los Angeles. We worried then about our enemies rather than each other, and we should return to that model. We also, frankly, need to get back to partnering with and supporting our allies. This administration has publicly and repeatedly threatened to seize the territory of NATO allies and retake the Panama Canal. The president paused aid to Ukraine, both intelligence partnership and military support, in the middle of their just war against one of our primary global enemies. And at times, rather than help and partner with our allies, we've levied massive tariffs against our partners. The department's fiscal year 26 request compounds these mistakes by explicitly eliminating assistance to Ukraine and slashing security cooperation with allies around the world, sending exactly the wrong signal. Our global network of strong allies is our asymmetric advantage. The administration's budget request may try to abandon our allies, but this Congress should not. I'll also cite a predecessor in your role, Secretary Mattis, who testified to Congress that we need to complement strong investments in defense with comparable investments in diplomacy and development. In fact, I think he once said famously, if we don't spend adequately on diplomacy and development, I will need more bullets because we will be in more wars. Yet DOGE has shredded our development work, shredding trust as well with partners and allies. Last, I'm troubled by the chaos and poor judgment that have been on full display from the Pentagon front office. Mr. Secretary, you should not have shared operational details of U.S. military strikes on signal with other executive branch officials or personal acquaintances. Mishandling important and sensitive military information in the middle of an operation by a secretary is unthinkable. You've also fired several top aides, and you've been unable to hire a new chief of staff for months. Mr. Secretary, this cannot continue. Your responsibilities to our troops and our nation are far too important. We cannot win the fight for the future without allies, nor deter China and Russia without a functional Department of Defense. And we on this committee simply cannot do our job without an adequate budget submission. I welcome partnership on these important priorities, and I look forward to discussing why we haven't been able to achieve that so far and where to go from here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary General, go right ahead. We're anxious to hear from you.
Well, Chairman McConnell, Ranking Member Coons, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify today alongside General Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bryn McDonald, who is performing the duties of DOD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. We're also very proud to represent and serve our warriors and their families. Today, as they do every day, they're keeping America safe. They're defending the homeland. They're standing up to communist China. They're working hand in glove with our allies and partners, and they are achieving peace through strength. This morning, I'd like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. This included an additional 10.5% raise for our junior enlisted service members, E1 to E4. Thank you also for improving other initiatives that will improve quality of life for our warriors and their families. With a focus on our troops and their loved ones, I've directed additional actions that will further improve their quality of life. These include making historic investments to improve living conditions in barracks and base housing, reforming the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of these moves, and improving the quality of care provided to our defense healthcare system. The best part of our job, of my job, is meeting and interacting with the troops and their families. I hear their concerns. I know how it feels to face these challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback I or we have received directly from the force. We will keep listening and keep looking for ways to improve their quality of life. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961.6 billion budget request, which is over $1 trillion for national security total, will end 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military by the Biden administration. Now, as is custom with first-year administration budget releases, additional time was necessary to implement presidential initiatives. So in the last 4 months, we have moved very quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. We found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department. We killed wasteful programs, targeted bureaucratic excess, and redirected funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. Working with the Department of Homeland Security, we increased border security, to say the least. We reduced China's malign influence in our hemisphere. We defended freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, because of so much deferred maintenance, we still have a lot of work in front of us to achieve peace through strength. So to carry out the president's mission, we've set 3 priorities for the department: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we're restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump charged me to focus relentlessly on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness, and that's exactly what we're doing. We're refocusing on what's important, our warriors. We're sweeping away distractions and bloated bureaucracy. We set standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach. And our force is responding incredibly positively to these changes. Because of President Trump, recruiting and retention is higher than it's been in decades. This budget provides a historic level of funding for military readiness, putting our warfighters and their needs first. And young Americans are responding and signing up in droves. Second, we are rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged, yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump is correcting those mistakes. We're reviving our defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies and new weapons so that our warfighters can meet the challenges of an evolving threat field. This budget invests $25 billion in Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion in total to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces as we face rising nuclear dangers. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first 6th-generation air superiority fighter. The budget will also revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26 and $47 billion total in shipbuilding. The budget also significantly increases funds to buy next-generation technology, including autonomous systems, long-range drones, long-range fires, and hypersonics. We will put these capabilities in the hands of our warfighters. These steps will keep us the strongest and most lethal force in the world. Third, we're reestablishing deterrence. When an opponent sees our well-equipped and tough-as-nails warriors, they will decide that today is not the day to test American resolve. Credible deterrence starts at home. It starts with securing our borders. We will achieve 100% operational control of our border, and so far border crossings are down 99.9% from the open border policies of the previous administration. The Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and China is our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled to the Indo-Pacific twice already to visit our forces and meet with our allies and partners. As we shift our focus toward the Indo-Pacific, President Trump looks to our allies and partners to be force multipliers alongside the United States. We are making progress in that endeavor on multiple theaters. We applaud those allies and partners who are stepping up, but also need more done more quickly, to include with our partners in Europe. As the President has rightly pointed out, it is only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We can't want their security more than they do. The Defense Department is executing a common sense agenda to achieve peace through strength. The threats we face are serious. Our investments to counter them must also be. That's what this budget does. It matches capabilities to threats. We long for peace, so we must prepare for war. We are overcoming decades of neglect and decline. We must fortify our position as the world's most lethal fighting force, and that means acting fast. This committee is a critical partner in everything we do. Your leadership and oversight is essential. We look forward to accomplishing these goals to achieve peace through strength, support our warriors, protect our citizens, and do right by our taxpayers together. May God grant us the wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. Thank you.
Chair McConnell, Ranking Member Coons, Chair Collins, other ranking members of the committee, senators, thank you for having me today. I'm honored to join Secretary Hegseth and Ms. Bryn McDonald to appear before you today to testify on the President's fiscal year 2026 budget. Today's hearing reflects our shared commitment to maximize efficiency and accountability of our taxpayers' dollars, ensuring every expenditure increases the lethality and survivability of our joint force, and providing our warfighters with the advanced capabilities and cutting-edge technologies at scale required to dominate our adversaries. I've got deep gratitude for the leaders in this room and your commitment to helping deliver the capability and capacity required of our 2.8 million service members, civilians, and their families to deliver peace through strength. It's my responsibility as chairman to understand, advise, and integrate our joint force capabilities to confront the risks that we face worldwide. This demands a comprehensive understanding across every domain: land, sea, air, space, and cyber, across all the military services, every region of the globe, and all time horizons. It also requires making hard, informed decisions about where to recommend we prioritize our finite capital that you give us in order to determine and return the ROI on that capital. The President's budget enables the joint force to defend our great nation from adversaries, Mr. Chairman, as you said, seeking to do us harm. We're relentless in our pursuit of innovation and technology that allows us to hopefully deter war at every opportunity while ensuring that we're positioned to win should we be called upon to do so. This budget empowers the joint force to get after the Secretary's three pillars, as he mentioned: restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing deterrence. We intend to deliver that through ensuring that the joint force is properly armed, globally integrated, and ready to go. As I mentioned, the President's budget invests in our warfighters. To win on the battlefields of the future, our forces must be properly armed now, at scale, with the right mix of capabilities: lethal, modern, reliable, and survivable. Victory requires people and platforms that will allow us to overmatch the enemy, systems that will work under the most harshest conditions, and technologies that will give our warfighters a lethal edge. The budget gives us the necessary tools to reinvigorate our national and defense industrial base. And our nation is full of incredible talent. We need every bit of it to support the warfighters' demands. This budget also helps the joint force to become more globally integrated. We are relationship entrepreneurs in the joint force, not only working together with our military, but our allies and partners, the interagency, and industry to deliver the capabilities that we've got to have. Finally, the President's budget reflects our mandate to be ready, always on the account, anticipating the next fight, not fighting the last fight, in order to deliver for our force and their families. And our force and our families are most important part. This budget makes meaningful investments in our service members and their families, improving quality of life, housing, and medical care, and the moving process. As long as our most precious asset, our people, are properly armed, integrated together, and ready to go, our citizens will be defended, our enemies deterred, and our nation safe. Speaking of keeping our nation safe, I want to highlight the gunnery sergeant behind me, the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, who after 37 years of selfless service to the nation and as the nation's highest ranking enlisted service member, will retire from the service later this month. And he and his wife, who's also a Marine, have gone all in over and over again. It's an honor to serve every day alongside some of the most extraordinary warriors, civilian teammates, civil servants, and our families in this nation have ever known. I assure this committee that the Joint Force remains committed and ready to go. With your continued support, we'll maintain the competitive edge that we need to have. I'm also reminded to always remember our deployed service members right now and their families, who are right now, as we sit here today in this hearing room, out there doing our nation's business. And I would ask us all to remember our fallen and their families, who continue to show us what right looks like. I thank you for the Congress and this committee for the support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. Mr. Secretary, probably won't surprise you, but I'm going to start with Ukraine. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions, but I don't want you to linger on any one of them, but answer the series of questions in one answer. Number one, who's the aggressor and who's the victim in the conflict?
Russia is the aggressor.
Which side do you want to win?
As we've said time and time again, this president is committed to peace in that conflict. Ultimately, peace serves our national interests, and we think the interest of both parties, even if that outcome will not be preferable to many in this room and many in our country.
Which side is President Xi pulling for?
Well, as was stated by both of you, we obviously understand, unfortunately, under this administration and the policy, under the previous administration and the policies they pursued, it has driven Russia and China closer together. So there's no doubt that China would prefer that Vladimir Putin have a good outcome, but it would also prefer a prolonged conflict that would keep us and other countries tied down and incapable of paying attention to the malign influence of China elsewhere.
One thing I'm sure we agree on is we don't want a headline at the end of this conflict that says Russia wins and America loses. And given the fact that all of our adversaries are communicating with each other, that's extremely important if we're going to continue to play the role in the world that the vast majority of members of Congress think we should still play, particularly now that our adversaries are more significant than they have been since the Berlin Wall came down. With regard to the money we're spending, what's the return on the investment of our security assistance to Ukraine?
Senator, I would just say, given the approach of President Trump, that's not the headline, regardless. The previous administration, under the Obama administration, Crimea was invaded, and we gave them blankets. Under President Trump, during his first term, he gave the Ukrainians javelins, and the Russians did not invade. Under Biden, the Russians did invade, and aid was slow-walked incompletely, and as a result, it became a gridlock. Thankfully, the javelins that President Trump provided actually stalled the Russian advance. Now we are at a place where Vladimir Putin knows that President Trump is strong. He knows his word means something, and as a result, a negotiated peace in Ukraine makes America look strong, makes us look like we understand the state of the world and where we want to be focused, even if we understand that Russia's the aggressor and we applaud the efforts of the Ukrainians. There is a moment where you have to recognize what exists on the battlefield and that a better outcome is a negotiated peace to stop the killing and stop the slaughter. And our budget reflects that perspective.
If I may, Mr. Secretary, I'm not here to defend the previous administration. They were completely inadequate anyway, and I think you could make an argument that the precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan was like a green light to Putin. But we are where we are, and beating up the past is not a plan for going forward to the future. What has benefited the United States, I think you would agree, 38 different states have produced weapons or parts of weapons out of the money that the Ukraine supplemental package passed last year. 2 new members of NATO now increased spending by virtually all of our NATO allies, which President Trump deserves part of the credit for encouraging that. Vladimir Putin probably guaranteed it would happen. Everybody seems to be moving in the right direction. And then they look at us and wonder whether we're in the midst of brokering what appears to be allowing the Russians to define victory. I think victory is defined by the people that have to live there, the Ukrainians. And I don't think they're going to ever conclude that victory means basically adopting the Russian views on all this. So what do you make of what the Russians are up to? They don't seem to me to be too interested in talking. We want to talk. They seem to be increasing the war. What's your take on that?
Well, no one's adopting views, sir. I would say that the budget reflects the reality that Europe needs to step up more for the defense of its own continent. And President Trump deserves the credit for that. In his first term in this term, we're about to go to The Hague, where we hope most European NATO countries are going to commit to a 3.5, 1.5 total of 5% defense spending, which was inconceivable before President Trump. And he has set the standard that America can't be everywhere all the time for everybody. And if you're a European country, you cannot freeload off of the United States in perpetuity. You are our allies and our friends, and we will stand with you, but you need to stand up in times of peace and in times of war. And this budget reflects that it's long overdue Europe does more, and that we be strategic about the outcome there, even if it's not preferable for all parties, so that our focus can turn, as was mentioned by everybody thus far, to the Indo-Pacific and our pacing threat, while Europe ensures peace on that continent. And so the budget is meant to reflect that reality. It includes hard choices, but that's been one of the things we're trying to do in this Defense Department, is make some of those hard choices alongside President Trump.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to conclude this before turning over to Senator Coons, relitigating the past, it seems to me, is not helpful. I didn't defend any of the submissions, budget submissions that the previous administration made. I had a lot of the same complaints about how they were handling this. I want to avoid that for the future. And it seems to me pretty obvious that America's reputation is on the line. Will we defend democratic allies against authoritarian aggressors? That's the international concern that I have about this. And I think a number of my members share that view. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, just a quick question to clarify something. Is a full year continuing resolution bad for the Department of Defense? Just yes or no?
Sir, a full year continuing resolution is never preferable for any department, especially the Department of Defense. Not preferable.
And I know, General Caine, I don't need to ask you because your written testimony specifically says routinely operating under continuing resolutions lowers buying power, results in less deployable capital, makes it harder for industry to make long-term investments. And is it your commitment, Mr. Secretary, that you'll work with us to achieve a full year appropriation? You'll submit the budget documents necessary, work with us closely that we'll be able to do our work so you can do yours?
Senator, we are committed to working with you to make sure the Defense Department gets as robust a budget as possible where we can meet the threats of today and tomorrow.
Thank you. I'll just say at the outset for all my colleagues, I am increasingly concerned that there is a threat that some believe they can best govern by continuing resolution, reconciliation, and rescission, and not ever actually have us appropriate. So I look forward to working with you to avoid that outcome, which I think would both disregard the role of Congress and put all of us at greater risk. It seems to me clear with regards to Ukraine that Vladimir Putin has no serious intent of negotiating. He continues to attack civilian targets night after night with hundreds and hundreds of drones. The Ukrainians have just carried out a spectacular attack against military targets. And it seems to me concerning that the 2026 request eliminates aid to Ukraine entirely. At the same time, the Senate has a strongly bipartisan bill led by Senator Graham and Senator Blumenthal to impose more sanctions on Russia, and many senators of both parties want to provide more aid to Ukraine. Would you agree, Mr. Secretary, that the United States should use every tool it has at its disposal, including additional sanctions, to pressure Russia to come to the table to negotiate a just and lasting peace for the war in Ukraine?
Senator, every tool at our disposal? No. We have a lot of tools in a lot of places.
Let me be more narrow.
Let me be more narrow
then.
Apply.
You said, and I'll take some exception to this, that our European allies cannot freeload off the United States in perpetuity. My impression is that Article 5 of the NATO treaty was only invoked once. It was after 9/11. And a significant number of our European allies and partners deployed to Afghanistan alongside us and suffered significant combat casualties. In the first 2 years of the war in Ukraine, a war of Russian aggression, 50 other countries stepped forward, deployed military support, delivered materiel, provided financial and operating support, and at regular meetings of the Defense Contact Group, your predecessor led that process of deploying military assistance. What message do you think it sends? That as Ukraine continues to suffer day after day of punishing attacks on civilian centers, we're not using the $3.8 billion in presidential drawdown authority that remains to send additional air defense and interceptors, and you yourself chose to not attend the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. Mr. Secretary, why not use the already appropriated presidential drawdown authority to deliver defense material badly needed by Ukraine?
Well, Senator, as you know, presidential drawdown authorities 71 through 74 still apply, and they are still flowing. There's some in reserve. To your question about my statement, and I served with a lot of NATO allies in Afghanistan as well. Incredibly capable Canadians, Brits, and Australians, and others. And grateful for them, and I've gotten to know a lot of them in this process going to Brussels. Amazing people, amazing countries.
Thus, I was struck, Mr. Secretary.
But we also wore a patch on our shoulder.
Yes.
That said ISAF, International Security Assistance Force. And you know what the joke was? That it stood for I Saw Americans Fighting. Because what ultimately was a lot of flags, was not a lot of on-the-ground capability. You're not a real coalition, you're not a real alliance, unless you have real defense capability and real armies that can bring those to bear. And that's a reality that Europe is waking up to quickly, and we're glad, because they're our friends, and we want them to be safe and free and secure. And sometimes that takes true talk and tough love, and they've responded very well to that because we want them to succeed. And
Mr. Secretary, let's just make clear for the record that our military partners in Afghanistan included many who served and died. Our Danish partners and allies on a per capita basis
don't try to make it look like I don't care about the investments of our partners. Of course I do.
Mr.
I recognize
Secretary,
that there were lives lost from other countries.
Of
but
course
the bulk of the effort was Americans, and an alliance needs to include other countries and be more balanced.
Mr. Secretary,
to be a real alliance.
As I pointed out in my opening comments, our partners and allies have stepped up, have invested, have engaged in the defense of Ukraine, and so should we. We should not be pursuing a ceasefire and a negotiated resolution to the war in Ukraine at any cost. Peace through strength means actually using our strength, continuing to support Ukraine, and securing a lasting peace. Putin will only stop when we stop him. And the best way to stop him is indeed through a stronger NATO, I look forward to the NATO summit. I agree with you that a significant investment by NATO in our collective security is a great investment, but we cannot abandon Ukraine. That would put us significantly at a strategic disadvantage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me start by thanking you for framing what is at stake and for your emphasis on Ukraine. I also agree with Vice Chair Coons that the department has been unacceptably slow in providing us with the account level information that we need to draft the defense appropriations bill. I agree with him that a CR is not conducive to the smooth and effective operations of the department, but I would respectfully point out to my colleague that the Appropriations Committee reported the Defense Appropriations Bill before the August recess, and it was the Democratic leader who decided not to bring the bill to the floor. And that is why we ended up with a continuing resolution. Mr. Secretary, let me turn to you now. You recently stated that DOD is focused on the strategic threat posed by China and that this threat is, and these are your words, real and could be imminent. And I agree with you. China now fields a navy of approximately 400 ships and is expanding its fleet at a pace that far exceeds ours. The U.S. Navy currently has only 293 ships, clearly inadequate. Yet the Department of Defense budget for FY26 proposes funding for only 3 additional ships, a Columbia-class submarine, a Virginia-class submarine, and an ocean surveillance ship. No funding in the base budget is requested for DDG-51s, the Navy's workhorse surface combatant. Instead, the administration unwisely is relying on reconciliation to fund a second Virginia-class submarine and 2 Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers. Reconciliation, Mr. Secretary, was meant to provide one-time supplemental funds to augment the defense budget, not to supplant the investments that should be in the base budget. Could you explain the department's rationale for excluding these critical war-fighting platforms from the annual appropriations request and creating instability for future defense budgets?
Well, Senator, I appreciate the question. There are a lot of complexities that go into how budgets are formed. From the view of our department, working on Capitol Hill and with the White House, is that we have 2 bills and 1 budget. So when I look at the threats that we face in the Indo-Pacific, that is precisely as we've worked with the chairman and the joint staff and across OSD and all the COCOMs, that has precisely been the compass by which we have judged the capabilities that we need. So when you look at the totality of the $961 billion or $1 trillion total over national security, that's 19 new ships. It's a historic investment in shipbuilding. It's over $6 billion in the shipbuilding defense industrial base. It's long-range fires, it's hypersonics, it's pre-positioning stocks, it's critical munitions. It's all focused in ways the previous administration talked a lot about, but we are actually making the tough choices to invest in. So I understand the dynamics of base bill versus reconciliation, and I concede that, ma'am. But ultimately, we're looking at it as one investment for FY26, and we think with a 13% increase over last year, that it's a historic investment.
Well, I would point out that the budget overall actually provides less buying power than the FY25 enacted budget because it does not adjust for inflation. And I hope that's something that we can work together on to correct. Let me turn to another issue. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine, overhauls the Navy's submarines, nuclear submarines. Senator Shaheen and I helped to secure an exemption from the hiring freeze for the shipyard, and that is absolutely essential. But if I could speak for Senator Shaheen as well as myself, both of us are hearing from shipyard leaders as well as the Navy, as well as the rank and file workers, the union leadership, that the delays in hiring and onboarding across the workforce, from frontline mechanics to security personnel, continue. Could you speak to what is causing this delay since the exemption from the hiring freeze was granted months ago?
Well, it's a great point, Senator. I will have our team dive into that because that should not be the case. There was very specifically exempted because of the importance of those shipyards, and whatever we can do to speed it up for you, we will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Collins. Senator Murray and then Senator Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, you oversee one of the largest and most important organizations on planet Earth. More than anything, the Department of Defense needs stable, competent, and strategic leadership. And much as I had feared back in January, it is not what we are seeing under your leadership. In a matter of months, you have lost top aides and reportedly struggled to hire new ones. You have fired highly respected top military officials. You shared highly sensitive attack plans over Signal and apparently with people in your own personal circles, and you've not taken responsibility for those mistakes. All the while, the security challenges we face have grown larger, not smaller. And then in the face of these challenges, you have taken a series of actions that weaken our posture. For example, in my home state of Washington, which is home to many DoD installations critical to our Indo-Pacific strategy, you have pushed out almost 2,000 highly trained civilian employees, including at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Mr. Secretary, you talk about returning the department to its mission of warfighting, but I am repeatedly hearing that your policy and personnel changes at the Pentagon are only undermining, not strengthening our military's preparedness to protect our country. You are deploying the American military to police the American people. You're sending the National Guard into California without the governor's request. Sending the Marines not after foreign threats, but after American protesters. And now President Trump is promising heavy force against peaceful protesters at his DC military parade. Those sorts of actions and that sort of rhetoric from a president of the United States should stop every one of us cold. Threatening to use our own troops on our own citizens at such scale is unprecedented, it is unconstitutional, and it is downright un-American. We should all be speaking out against this and demanding accountability. Now, Mr. Secretary, I have to say, for people who tout their commitment to transparency and efficiency, I've never seen an administration more bent on hiding basic facts from American people. Your department has been unresponsive to congressional inquiries and oversight requests, all the while you are working to muzzle the free press, denying journalists access to the Pentagon press corps. Now, before I turn to my questions, let me just note, it is now mid-June, and we only, just a few days ago, received some, but not all, important portions of your budget request. It should not have taken this long to get this request, and we do still need to see the justifications in order for this committee to do its work. We're missing those. Not having a full budget at this juncture is really unacceptable. So I am deeply concerned. So let me turn to my questions, and this is important. This administration has put the civilian workforce under attack from day one, encouraging resignations, firing probationary employees, instituting hiring freeze, requiring OPM to approve any new hire one by one, and now, new last week, requiring prospective employees to explain how they would, quote, help support the president's executive orders and policy priorities. We have spoken with military installations across our country. Almost all of them have been forced to fire skilled civilian employees who are badly needed. And all of them also have hundreds, and in some cases thousands, of new hires ready to bring on board, but now have to individually be reviewed by OPM, apparently to ensure that they support the president's priorities. Secretary Hegseth, I want to know, and keep your answers short, I have limited time, will you be firing more shipbuilders, yes or no?
Senator, we haven't fired shipbuilders. We've offered through a right sizing of our civilian positions, which
So
everyone in this committee would acknowledge that the Defense Department has had a bloated bureaucracy for a long
so
time,
you
have
will
given a
not be-
voluntary process by which some people
we all
can choose
know
to
the
take
process.
a DRP.
I'm just asking you
so
a
it's not a
question.
firing of shipbuilders.
so
That's a
you're-
totally disingenuous characterization of what our
Let me
department is
just
doing.
ask
We
you,
are focusing on shipbuilding.
Mr.
ma'am.
Secretary, do we need more or fewer shipbuilders?
We are investing historically in our shipbuilding defense industrial base and workforce and ships in this budget, more than anything the previous administration ever
Okay.
did.
So, well, you managed to fire highly skilled workers, including my home state of Washington, for no reason. So let me just say, the Navy needs welders, not people who can recite a president's executive orders. If the Navy wants to hire a qualified candidate for the role, but that candidate happened to vote for or donate to Democrats, would they be hired?
Senator, there's never been a litmus test for hiring welders.
Well,
If
that,
you can
that
weld,
is
you
what
can
the
work
new,
at the Defense Department.
That is what they're being asked. And Mr. Secretary, I just have to say, we need to drop the politics in our military. We need to hire the best people. We do not need to force them out. That is simply the case at this point. I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Graham.
Thank you. Welcome. One of the things you're trying to do is hire people based on merit, right?
Yes, sir.
You could care less if they're libertarian, vegetarian, Democrat, Republican, as long as they can do the job?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. More people are joining the military now than any time in recent memory, right?
Yes, sir.
So the situation described by Senator Murray is not being viewed by other Americans because they're signing up in droves.
Senator, there's been a historic surge.
You know why? Because they think you're a winner. They think you're going to lead. They think you're going to have their back. That's why they're signing up. Keep doing what you're doing. Now, do you agree that the world kind of miscalculated Hitler in the 20s and 30s?
Certainly did not understand the scope of the threat. Yes,
Like the
Senator.
guy wrote a book, I want to kill all the Jews, and nobody believed him. You remember that? General Caine, is that a fair statement that the military-industrial complex of the 20s and 30s really didn't miscalculated Hitler?
Yes, sir.
The danger of that is like 50 million people get killed. So let's don't do that now. As to Iran, they say they want to kill all the Jews. Do you agree with them?
I believe they mean what they chant. Yes, Senator.
Do you agree with that, General Caine?
Sir, I think they've got some agendas for sure to
Well, is
advance
that
our-
agenda to use a nuclear weapon against Israel?
Sir, I think they would potentially.
They
do
had
that,
a
yeah.
nuclear weapon, would they use it against Israel? In your professional military judgment.
Sir, I think they'd use it to pressure Israel. I don't know whether they would use it.
Well, is it 50-50, 60-40, 70-10? What is it?
Sir, I don't know what the percentage is.
Well, you can't be wrong, can you? What does Israel think?
Sir, I think they think they would potentially.
What do you
use
think,
nuclear-
Mr. Secretary? If they
I
had a
think-
nuclear weapon, would they use it to wipe out Israel?
I think Israel believes, and quite understandably,
Do you believe that?
That it is an existential
Do
threat
you
to their
believe
existence.
that?
Hold on, and in the hands of the wrong Iranian, a cleric or a radical, that they would seek to
Well,
use.
is this a radical cleric that exists there today?
Well, as of
If
right
he's
now,
not,
yes.
who the hell would be? So I'm trying to get everybody to think, let's don't do what we did in the 30s. They're going to use a nuclear weapon if they get it. Are they trying to build a nuclear weapon versus a peaceful nuclear power program, Mr. Secretary? Have the Iranians been trying to build a nuke?
There are plenty of indications that they have been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon.
Does China intend to take Taiwan by force if necessary?
We don't believe they've made that decision yet, but certainly if you look at their exercises that they're performing in that area, they
What do
look
you
a lot
think,
like
General
what that would
Caine?
look
Do you
like.
think China is intent on taking Taiwan?
Sir, I think it, not to split hairs, but I think it depends on what you define take. I think if.
I mean, like, take it over.
I think if they could get them their way, for sure. Do I think they're going to use military capability? Maybe, maybe not. Do we need to be prepared for that? Yes.
Is Putin going to stop in Ukraine?
I don't believe he is, sir. I think he'll
What do you
go
think?
until.
What do you think, Secretary? Is he going to stop?
Remains to be seen, Senator.
Well, he says he's not. I mean, you know, this is the 30s all over. It doesn't remain to be seen. He tells everybody around what he wants to do. Are you familiar with his military buildup in terms of armaments? It's well beyond what we need to do to take Ukraine. Listen, I think I like what you're doing. I just think we got to get this stuff right. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon because they'll use it. They're homicidal maniacs who are religious Nazis. China is an expansionist power who will take Taiwan if we don't deter them. Russia will dismember Ukraine and keep going if we don't stop them. Radical Islam, are they still out there, General Caine?
Sir, I think there are still folks that would do America harm.
So is ISIS dead?
No, sir.
Is Al-Qaeda dead?
Mostly, and dying more every day.
Yeah, but are they still out there trying to get here?
Yes, sir, to a
So
certain
the
extent.
threat of radical Islam is still real to the American people?
Yes, sir, if allowed to scale. We
Yeah.
work hard to not allow that to happen.
And how you do that, you hit them over there before they come here, right?
So we have a variety of ways, as you know.
It's better to have partners than do it by yourself.
Always, sir, yes.
Okay, so go over just a little bit. The point is radical Islam is out there. They're trying to get here. Ms. Secretary, if they had a nuclear weapon, would they use it? Would Al-Qaeda use a nuclear weapon if they had one?
Senator, a nuclear weapon in the hands of al-Qaeda would be a very bad thing.
Is there a whole lot of difference between a nuclear weapon in the hands of Al-Qaeda and the Ayatollah in Iran? I don't think so. They just have a different religious reason to do it. The point is these budgets are important, but we need to up our game. We need to build more ships because China's building more ships. So we need to hit the enemy before they hit us. We need the ability to project. As to, final thought, as to Russia, China buys and India buys 70% of Russia's oil, Mr. Secretary. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
If they stop buying cheap Russian oil tomorrow, would that grind Putin's war machine to a halt?
It's a vulnerability. Yes, sir.
We have an ability through legislation to get China and India's attention that if you keep buying cheap Russian oil to empower Putin to kill Ukrainian children, you're going to lose access to our markets. I would urge you and the administration to use that tool to get the attention of China and India. I'll end with this. We're not going to evict every Russian from Ukraine. I'm a practical guy. But we got to end this war so we don't entice China to take Taiwan, and we don't encourage Iran to think we're just all talk and stopping their nuclear ambitions. So you live in very dangerous times. I want to help you. General Caine, you're the right man at the right time. Thank you.
Senator Reed, and then Senator Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you have already ordered 4,000 National Guardsmen into Los Angeles, plus 700 active duty Marines. That's against the advice and opposition of the governor, the mayor, and the chief of police of Los Angeles. And these forces are in addition to 11,000 military personnel, active duty and National Guard, that have been deployed to the southern border in support of Customs and Border Protection. Separately, the Department of Homeland Security has requested more than 20,000 National Guard troops to assist in, I quote, interior immigration efforts. And I understand you've approved an additional phase of 700 service members for this mission, with additional associated command and control from Texas, Florida, and Louisiana. This week, the Department of Homeland Security sent another request for DoD support to transport ammunition, quote, to authorize military forces to detain or arrest American citizens, to provide DHS with military drone surveillance support, and to have the Marine Corps advise DHS on running joint operations. Is it your intent to improve these requests, all of them?
Well, Senator, we very much support President Trump's focus on defending the homeland on our southern border, as well as supporting law enforcement officials doing their job in ICE in Los Angeles who deserve not to be assaulted, accosted, and rioted while rounding up one of the 21 million illegals allowed in as an invasion under the previous administration. I would
Are you
note,
prepared to authorize DHS to use drones and also to authorize military forces to detain or arrest American citizens?
Senator, every authorization we've provided the National Guard and the Marines in Los Angeles is under the authority of the President of the United States, is lawful and constitutional. They are assisting in defending
So the answer
law
is yes.
enforcement officers
So the
and law
answer is
enforcement
yes.
facilities.
So
in
the answer is
in the
yes.
execution of their job
The answer is yes.
in the city of Los Angeles.
How are you paying for this? Is this done on a reimbursable basis by the Department of Homeland Security? Or is the Department of Defense paying for this?
As we mentioned yesterday, a lot of this we are paying for, and some will collaborate with DHS on.
And how is that done, given a CR which restricts your spending dramatically? What are you taking from? Readiness?
Well, as we acknowledged, and I can pass to my colleague Bryn, who knows the details on this, but in 2025, where we took from, we have completely refunded and then some in the FY26 budget.
Your whole ethic seems to be revolving on the lethality of the military force. How is this operation with Marines and National Guardsmen improving their lethality?
Senator, you mentioned the 11,000 at the border. It's actually 13,000. And I've been down there to speak with them multiple times. And people will say that mobilization hurts readiness. When you talk to them, it actually improves their readiness.
I'm talking about lethality. That's what you talk about all the time.
Readiness and training and
Training,
accountability is all part of lethality.
No, that's right,
The
training.
more ready you are, the more capable you are, the more accountable you are, the higher your standards
How
are.
much-
It all makes you more lethal.
So you're,
And the mission in Los Angeles, as you know well, sir, is not about lethality. It's about maintaining law and order on behalf of law enforcement agents who deserve to do their job
Excuse me.
without being attacked by mobs of people. And so
Law-
we're very proud that the National Guard and the Marines are on the streets defending the ICE agents, and they will continue
law
to do that.
and
They're doing
order
a great
is
job.
a civil function under the Constitution of the United States. Civil enforcement, law enforcement authorities, not the U.S. military. And
There's
there-
plenty of precedent for the U.S. military supporting law
And
enforcement officers.
what your military is doing right now is laying concertina wire, guarding buildings, maintaining vehicles for other services. This is not only, I think, illegal, but also a diminution of the readiness and the focus of the military. But let me change course a bit. There's a general understanding that you have taken possession of this Qatari aircraft, the 747. But there are public reports that the Qataris have not yet signed a memorandum of understanding, which would specify that the agreement was initiated by the Trump administration, and Qatar is not responsible for any future transfers of the plane's ownership. Are you in possession of the Qatari airplane now?
Any specifics about future aircraft that could be Air Force One can't be discussed here, but
Sure it can be
there
discussed
is a
here. Are you
conversation
in
about a
possession-
memorandum of understanding. A memorandum of understanding remains to be signed, Senator.
You have signed a contract with a company to reconfigure the aircraft. What is the price of that contract?
That cannot be revealed in this setting, sir.
Why can't it be repealed in this setting? Well, this is the Appropriations Committee of the United States Senate. We appropriate the money that you will spend after it's authorized by my committee. And you cannot tell us how much the contract is for?
You will have that number, Senator. It just
No,
can't be talked
we
about
want
in
it
a
now.
public
It's
realm.
been signed, the contract has been signed, correct? The contract has been signed?
The memorandum of understanding is not
No,
complete, and
I'm
therefore
talking about
it's
the
not complete.
contract with the American contractor. Has it been signed?
It's nothing on that front that I'm aware of is being executed.
Well, that's contrary to what we've all heard. Second thing, what's the delivery time in the contract?
Again, the delivery time of anything of that sensitive nature is not for public consumption.
Can you tell me the delivery time for the Boeing aircraft that were being prepared for Air Force One? Was that in the contract?
One of the problems is that the way we actually procure aircraft in this country takes so long
Oh,
that
yeah.
when it's ordered, it's 7, 8, 9, 10 years late, requiring the necessity for a stopgap alternative.
Well, no. What you've just said is that the Boeing information was public knowledge. The delivery date, the cost overruns, but this is not. Because this is not only a bad deal for the American public, it is just it's gratifying the president's ego. That's all it is. Thank you.
Senator Moran, and then Senator Durbin and Senator Hoeven.
Chairman McConnell, thank you. Secretary, an issue for me as a Kansan, but an issue for folks who fly out of Ronald Reagan National Airport. January 29th, Army Black Hawk helicopter and a commercial airliner arriving at DCA from Wichita collided midair. I know you're aware of it. You were involved in responding on the night of the accident, January the 29th. It killed 67 individuals, many of them Kansans. I want to hear a confirmation from you. Since that flight, I ask, as did the Department of Transportation, the FAA, that the helicopter flights emanating from the Pentagon be put on pause. It's my understanding from information from the Army is that since January 29th, 7 flights have taken off and landed at the Pentagon. 6 of those flights occurred during periods of high volume at DCA. One of those aircraft caused 2 different commercial flights to abort landing on May the 1st. And since this latest incident, I understand that all flights have been halted. My question is, will you commit to maintaining that restriction on all non-essential rotary flights, including VIP transport from the Pentagon until the Department of Transportation, the FAA, determines the safe way in which that can be done, if there is a safe way?
Senator, that was a very tragic incident, which can never happen again. We initiated an investigation immediately, worked directly with the Department of Transportation immediately. They've taken the lead on it. In real time at that moment, we even stood over maps and looked at routes to make sure we were ensuring that routes of Blackhawks were away from the flight path so that it didn't happen again. There are essential reasons why you may need to move along a corridor similar to that, but there is no authorization for VIP or convenience flights along that route. That is not the case and will not remain the case. You have our assurance that I'm working with Secretary Duffy very closely to make sure that the only flights that would be even in a modified path would be those that are necessary and authorized.
And that ban, except for that ban on non-essential flights, including VIP transportation, remains in effect until Secretary Duffy reaches a conclusion if it's possible to fly safely.
We are in direct coordination with Secretary Duffy, and we take his recommendations very seriously and work together. And only where there's a dynamic and ongoing need for the Defense Department would we push back and try to figure out a middle ground.
Thank you, and I compliment you on your response and engagement on January the 29th. I appreciate that very much, including the conversation you and I had that evening. There's so many national and international issues I want to talk to you about, but I also want to make certain that some things that no other member of this committee would ask about a circumstance that I've encountered in Kansas, and we've sought the Department of Defense's help, and we're fighting, in my view, we're fighting the bureaucracy. We have an Army Corps of Engineers lake in Kansas. It's next to a city, a community called Council Grove. It's a county seat town of several thousand people. Their community depends upon the tourist traffic and usage of that lake. They had a manager, a ranger at that lake. The Corps did. That ranger shifted to another lake. The hiring freeze prevented somebody from being hired to replace that person. The Secretary of the Army, I appreciate his cooperation, signed a waiver to allow the hiring, but now have been told weeks to months for the Army Corps of Engineers to go through the hiring process to replace the person. And if I could get your attention or your staff's attention to see if there is not a faster way. This community says that the people who come to stay and visit the lake, so at the moment the marina is threatened to be closed, there's no one to clean the latrines, no one can check the permits, so the lake is unusable, and summer is the season in which this community thrives based upon visitors to the lake. And I was told by the Army Corps of Engineers they had the person they wanted to hire. That person had applied, but the hiring freeze prohibited him from being hired. And they have people in mind to be the seasonal employees to do the seasonal work at the lake. But now the bureaucracy, my word, not anybody else's, I suppose, the bureaucracy of the Army Corps of Engineers delays this even weeks or months longer. The season, we've already missed Memorial Day. Can you help me?
This is an issue we were made aware of almost in real time, and the Secretary of the Army was very responsive.
He was.
And I'm actually meeting, as it happens today, with the Director of the Army Corps of Engineers to, across the board, identify where this is happening and free it up, so it'll get special attention.
I appreciate that very much. The season is fast dissipating for the success of that community's economic well-being. It was reported that the Pentagon is or has diverted anti-drone technology intended for Ukraine to the U.S. Air Force in the Middle East. And the explanation for that was the safety and security of our military men and women in the Middle East depend upon this technology. And I assume no one can argue with the importance of protecting our military. Was there a precipitating factor that caused that circumstance to be, that move to be necessary? And is there any plan to provide Ukraine with the necessary technology to replace that anti-drone defense, those anti-drone defenses?
Senator, as you know, the Middle East is and remains a very dynamic theater. In the interest of putting America and Americans first, we're going to surge counter-UAS systems to our troops and our bases and our places first if we think there's a potential for a threat. And considering the environment there right now, that has been and will continue to be a priority for us.
What about the capability of resupplying or reinserting that technology into other places, including Ukraine? Is the capacity just not sufficient to do that?
We would have to review the capacity, but it's one of the challenges of all the munitions that we've given to Ukraine over these last 3 years. Is it's created some challenges in other places.
I can imagine that many things are frustrating to you as they are to me, and one is our inability to have a supply chain sufficient to meet the global demands of the United States military in our country. And it is a focus that I heard you say in your testimony is one of yours. And our safety is dependent upon a private sector supply chain necessary to meet all needs, in my view, including those of supporting Ukraine. I'm very supportive of the department's review of our withdrawal from Afghanistan, the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think it was one of the saddest days in my experience as a member of Congress to see the circumstances and the nature of our departure and the loss of life that occurred in that effort. It is important that we do, when we're withdrawing, we do it in a way that protects our interests, and we did not do that in my view. It's also a poor signal to our adversaries that we are feckless, we're incapable of doing things well. It also is a message to our allies that we may not remain strong. and keep our commitments to them. So while I wouldn't debate the departure from Afghanistan, in my view, it's undebatable about the nature of the withdrawal and how damaging it was to our country. In the midst of all that chaos, we abandoned thousands of Afghans who worked side by side with Kansas soldiers. I hear about it frequently, and I heard more about it back at the time about who we left behind that were allies and friends of those who served. Can you help fix the problem of those who are in limbo, who were our Afghan allies, and their status either here in the United States or their status waiting to come to the United States? What should be our policy?
Senator, our doors have been open in
Could I just
unprecedented.
take a minute to encourage everybody to stay within the 5 minutes, because we have a number of senators here who need to get a chance.
I obviously violated the rule and didn't know it, Mr. Chairman.
So after Senator Moran, we'll go to Senator Durbin and then Senator Hoeven.
Mr. Secretary, I'll follow up with you.
Okay.